Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. In this video, we will be discussing how I save money on meat for a homestead, so please stick around. Welcome back. I'm Cynthia Cecil, and this is the Nameless Homestead. If you're a new viewer, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can be in the loop on all our videos, which cover a wide variety of topics from gardening to animal husbandry and so much more. With that out of the way, let's get to work. Today, we're going to be discussing how I save money providing meat to the table on our little homestead. I think anyone goes into this gig with the idea that they would be spending more money than they would make. The goal on our homestead is complete cost neutrality. We're not in it to make a bunch of money, but at the same time, I don't want to have to work a full-time job just so we can pay the feed bill. Our animals need to provide us something to neutralize the cost of their existence on our homestead. That doesn't always work out. Kidding doesn't go always as planned. You don't maybe grow out as many chickens as you wanted to that year, or in the winter and the fall, if you're not adding supplemental light, they've stopped laying and you can't sell the eggs. So another great way to make up the difference when it comes to the grocery bill and the homestead bill and your actual budget is to utilize places like Facebook groups and Craigslist to access meat for the table. Now, I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but it's actually really, really easy. There's a lot of people out there now who are doing micro homesteads and have backyard flocks in the city, but can't keep roosters because of city ordinances. And every year at about the time when those little cute chicks that you got at North 40 or one of your other homestead and farm stores have reached maturity and they start crowing, that people need to get rid of them so the neighbors don't complain and they don't get in trouble. And that is where I come in. They advertise free roosters that need to get going off of my local Facebook groups or Craigslist. And then I offer to give them temporary living arrangements. Now, there's one big key thing here. Before you accept an animal from anyone, make sure that they know that the animal is going to be going to the table. You don't want someone upset because they didn't realize you weren't giving it a forever home, unless you count freezer camp. So that's the one big caveat here, is you want to make sure that whomever you're getting this animal from knows that they are reaching their ultimate destiny very soon. And this isn't necessarily just about chickens or roosters either. We've done this with goats, and we hope to eventually do it with pigs. We actually almost once got a free pig off of Craigslist, but someone else actually went and picked up the little guy before we could make it out there, so we missed that opportunity. Probably the most common animals that you will find for putting to the table on a place like Craigslist or in local Facebook groups are probably going to be poultry of some variety. Turkeys, ducks, sometimes geese even, and mostly chickens, mostly being roosters. So today we're going to go through the process of how to ethically and humanely euthanize 2 roosters that were dropped off to us a couple of days ago and butchering them out in the way that I prefer, so that we can enjoy that bounty and reduce this week's grocery bill a little bit, therefore allowing us to sow a little bit more money into some things we need around on the homestead. Like, for example, today I'm picking up straw bedding because the bedding situation in the pig shed is atrocious. We really need to put down some sand this coming spring because it is not doing great in all of this wet, yucky weather. So let's move locations here inside. It's still pretty darn cold in the hay barn, and we'll start working on that process. So I obviously lied. We aren't going inside yet because I haven't shown you guys how I put down roosters, which I'm not going to show the gory bit here, but I want to show my setup and why I do things the way I do things. So the way that I take care of any poultry is by decapitation. Why do I choose to do that? Because I have experimented with many different ways of euthanizing an animal, and I feel like anything that separates cleanly the spine in the neck area and separates the head from the electrical signal to the body will immediately put an animal out and therefore causes the least amount of suffering. This little guy here is one of the specimens of the day. And I also wanted to point out the fact that sometimes animals you can get aren't always going to be the most healthy and well looked after from their previous habitat. And I wanted to show a couple of things on him to illustrate if you were handling an ill animal, you obviously wouldn't want to consume that animal, and what to look out for. So the first thing to look at when it comes to seeing whether or not you can easily identify whether or not a chicken is ill is to look at the color of the comb and wattles in the face. You want a nice, bright red, beautiful creature. If they are pale and lackluster, it's a greater sign of anemia or illness, and so the animal might be parasite-ridden. Don't you pick at me. Don't you do it. They're not, these chickens aren't used to being handled, so the fact that I'm holding him is really wigging him out. The next thing to look for is around the eye area. Animals and poultry specifically will get really huge, gross, oozy, ballooned out areas around the underside of their area, just in their sinus general space. If you see anything oozing or snotting or anything gross dripping out from the eyes or the nose, don't eat it. Better safe than sorry. There are very few things that could potentially be communicable. In fact, aside from bird flu, I don't think there is anything communicable with poultry. But don't take my word for it, Google it yourself. But those are really the things that you can look at before dispatch to determine whether or not this is an animal you should feel comfortable consuming. That being said, that leads us into another topic, which is quarantine. Any animal coming from an unknown space should be in a specific area that you have outlined for quarantine, and don't expose them to animals you already have, because animals can have communicable diseases that you may not be able to see that could get your other animals sick. And that just could even be as simple as intestinal parasites, which literally every animal has, isn't going to harm us at all. Even the animals that you get from Walmart, those birds had parasites. And it's just been dispatched, gutted, cleaned, and cooked, so it has no potential of really harming you. So just a couple of thoughts there. And the next thing I want to show you is how I set up my butcher station. So we'll go into that next. So this is what I use to take care of my poultry. Just a good old-fashioned stump. His buddy is over here in this very dirty kennel. And then in my stump, I have put 2 nails, about 1.5 to 2 inches apart, but you may need to move them closer together or further apart depending on what you're going to be butchering. This obviously wouldn't work for a goose, but it will for a rooster. And then this beautiful old butcher knife that my dear friend David gave to me, which has been honed and sharpened by my husband. You can use a hatchet, you can use an axe, or you can use a butcher knife like this, but the key here is the typical butcher knife from the butcher block and the set that you got from Target is not going to be heavy enough and weighty enough to do the job. You want something that will act just as if you were chopping wood for your wood stove, where it's really hefty and thick on one end so that you don't have to try to He-Man it down onto the spine of the animal that you are dispatching. It should have so much weight on one end that it's a nice, clean, simple motion, so you get complete separation of the head from the spine in the first whack. Now, why do I put these here? This is where the neck of the rooster goes. His head goes here, his neck goes there, his body comes along this way, so that way I have something to secure the rooster and he can't get away from me or move at the last second and cause injury. So now we have 2 roosters fully taken care of, and the last step in this process is processing them out to your preference. Now for this step, the really only 2 things you absolutely need to have on hand are a meat thermometer that you can see about 150 degrees on very easily. That is the temperature that we want to scald our birds at to make plucking easier. The first time I ever butchered out a chicken, I didn't realize that scalding was a thing, and I seriously sat there for like 20 minutes trying to pull dry feathers out of a chicken, which was a complete mess until a friend told me that I was a dork and I needed to scald the bird first. So that is, if anyone is ever wondering how people in bygone eras ever plucked chickens without going crazy, it's you dunk them in scalding hot, about 150 degree water until you can pull out a couple of the primary feathers, so the really big ones like along the wing or the tail feathers easily, which takes about 30 seconds to a minute or 2 depending on the size of bird that you're doing. The second thing, of course, you're going to need is a nice large stock pot. This is my Big Betty. Very good stock pot. I feel like every homestead needs like 6 of these in all various sizes. They work for everything. They work for making bone broth and for scalding poultry, and they're just amazing. Absolutely one of the best tools I have on my homestead is just a simple stock pot. So after this, we're just going to be dunking that guy in there as soon as we get her up to 150 degrees and start plucking. Now this is a perfect job to occupy the time of some very bored and obnoxious homestead kids who are home on Christmas break. So that is definitely something I'm going to be having them help me with. Plucking the chickens, and then it's just gutting and parting out. One big tip before I go on to this next step is a lot of the times you're going to be dealing with chickens that aren't the Cornish cross or meat birds. They're going to be Buff Orpingtons or mixed breeds like these guys here. And those take longer to grow out, so the meat's not going to be as tender if you don't let the meat rest and or brine. If you just try to cook this bird right after you've butchered it, hi, I've done that. With my first bird, I messed up so many things. You're not going to get chicken, you're going to get shoe leather. So that same stock pot over here in the background on my stove that we used to scald the bird on, I scrub out really good. Cleanliness is very important when dealing with meat. And then I put a bunch of salt in with it about half full of water and stick that guy with the birds parted out or whole, depending on how I butcher them, into the refrigerator for a couple of days. I've even gone up to 5 days for like an old 4-year-old rooster. And he did not need crock potted. He was tender and juicy and delicious, roasted as a whole bird with a side of potatoes and veggies. So you really can do this with any bird, no matter the gender, the age, or the breed, as long as you take into account the brining or resting stage for the meat. Now, cue the montage of my children making really weirded out faces as I have them help me pluck out these birds, and I will see you after these guys are all clean and ready to be put in the refrigerator. Another quick note on how to tell whether or not the chicken you've just butchered is healthy is to look at the lungs and the liver. The lungs should be a nice, pretty red color, no spots or scarring or chunks or anything else like that. A lot of the times on a sick chicken that had a respiratory illness, you'll see the big white spots like calcifications on the lungs or black spots. I wouldn't personally eat a chicken that had that. Everyone has to do their own research that. And of course, the liver should be a nice sort of chocolatey color. If you're seeing white swirls in it. It could be a sign of coccidosis. And if you're seeing big white spots and splotches everywhere, it could be a sign of liver fluke worms. And I also personally would pass on consuming a chicken with those defects. But these are really the two things you want to look for here. These chickens are absolutely beautiful. It's also good to do a cross section to just slice it open and take a look on the inside of both the lung tissue and the liver tissue, just to see if there's anything you may have missed that didn't show up on the surface. Now that we're all said and done, we have 2 roosters in a big stock pot full of salted water. Just make sure that they are fully submerged in your salt water mixture when they go into the fridge, and put a lid on this guy. We also have a Ziploc bag with 2 chicken feet and 2 chicken necks. We have 2 whole chickens, which then, for the meat that's left, can be shredded and then added to a super stew later on. And then the bones can be cooked down for chicken stock to use for other meals later down the road. And then, even yet again, you can use the feet and the necks to cook in a pot full of veggie scraps and that sort of thing to make more stock or to flavor a chicken noodle soup. So in the end, this concept follows that homesteader tradition and guide that most people follow, which is waste not, want not. So I personally find this to be a very rewarding labor, financially, and when it comes to the ideology of homesteading. So I'm going to go ahead and put these guys in the refrigerator for the next few days. The first one I'll probably make for Sunday dinner in the crock pot. So that's going to be the day that this video airs. If you want to come on by my Instagram or my Facebook, I'll post pictures of the meal that I made. And you guys will hopefully come and join in the conversation, maybe share what you're having for Sunday dinner, or even share some recipes that maybe I haven't tried yet for these gorgeous guys. Thank you so much for watching today. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell so that you can be notified when I make future videos. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.